All right, thank you. I should wait for the prompt. Let's try that again. What's a primer there? I'd like to call the City of Lake Forest Park City Council work session for Thursday, February 8th. To order, please. And with that, do I hear a motion for adoption of the agenda? So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. Thank you, council. And tonight we have just one topic. This is a very important one. Presentation of the I always abbreviated, the Open Public Meetings Act, the OPMA, and Public Records Act. And this is our friend, Attorney Pratt. Thank you so much for this.
You are welcome. And I think Matt is gonna run slides. I'll run them out. And I hope that I can stay on track because I thought I would be doing the slides. So all my notes are by slide number. So we'll just see how I do. But so this is going to be a repeat for some of you and new for a couple of you too. And please feel free to ask questions. So go ahead, Matt. There you go. Okay, go ahead. We'll start with Public Meetings Act. So the purpose of the OPMA is to allow the public to view the decision-making process. And you'll find that the definitions in the act are very broad so that we make that happen. Go ahead, Matt.
Let me check, do a sound check. Ellen, can you hear us okay? Just let us know if we can speak up.
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Thank you.
You bet. Sorry, Kim.
No, it's okay. I'm glad you checked. Thank you. So all meetings, and we'll look at what meetings are of the governing body. That's a broader phrase than you think it is, maybe. Of a public agency shall be open to the public and all persons permitted to attend any meeting, except as otherwise provided in the chapter. So we know there are some limited exceptions, and we've already had one executive session this year. So you know that occurs. Then next slide. Bare basics. We have a quorum. So 4 of you, and there is action, then that is a meeting that has to have all the parameters of the Open Public Meeting Act, which means there has to be notice of the meeting and the public has a right to attend. So next slide. So a governing body, multi-board, commission, council, like yourselves, policy or rulemaking body, like yourselves. This part, any committee thereof, so your budget committee, I believe you only have 3 people on it, so you do not have a quorum. But if you did, it would be open to Public Meetings Act. And then any committee or board that acts on your behalf. Now that means someone who have delegated some of your authority to. And in someone who will hold, say, public hearings, like the Planning Commission. That is by definition, the Planning Commission falls under the OPMA guidelines. You have some boards and commissions that are not technically falling under OPMA guidelines, but so far I have heard loud and clear from you that you want them to operate under the OPMA, and so they do. But you have not really they give you recommendations, they tell you what they think should be done, they look at fact-finding things for you, but you have not delegated them authority, but Lake Forest Park does treat them under the OPMA. So next slide. Action. This is very broad too. So transacting business of the city, you would know that would be action. Taking public testimony, action, and deliberations, okay, action, discussions. This is very broad. This is 4 of you sitting down at dinner and talking about anything related to city business. So just think of that. To me, that's the broadest ones. the broadest one, discussion, consideration, very broad. Final action would be the vote. There are a lot of things that happen before that that are considered action and require an open meeting. And here we have final action, that's the vote, collective decision making, sometimes it's just a motion, but that's the final action. And like we said, definition of action is much broader than final action. Next slide. Meeting examples, your regular meetings, special meetings. Next slide. This is the tricky ones. Email conversations. If there is an email conversation going on between four of you, that could be a meeting because you might be discussing city business. That's why we try and say, do not reply all, because we don't want to get into a serial meeting over email. And there's some case law about that where it's happened. Same with texting. One thing that you might not think of, and I believe we've talked about it before, but not lately, is if a quorum of you get into a, what's it called, neighbor,
Next door.
next door. Four of you are in the next door chat. Please don't do that.
It's bad to me.
Or on a Facebook chat about something, that's city business. If it's, about gardening or something, great, that's not city business, that's wonderful. But if it's about city business, if you see someone else on there, it's best just to not chime in.
Could I say, those of us who have been on the council are used to Tom being a council member, but Tom doesn't count as a council member anymore.
I don't count. I'm offended.
He's moved to the higher level.
Yeah.
Tom plus 3 is not a quorum.
Right, right,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
So I think the serial phone call texting, I think it's important to remember that you might not even know it became a serial.
Yeah.
So if I talk to Tracy talks to Paula, and then Paula talks to Lori, we have a meeting.
Yeah.
And we have had discussion, so we fall under action. And Lori may not know. So that's where we have to be very careful, is if you'll hear us often say, like, who else did you talk to? Because we want to avoid those serial conversations, because that can get us into deep trouble once 4 or 5 of us have talked about a topic, even if you don't all know what everyone has said.
Good point.
It's just on point too. Councilmember Riddle may remember a big conflagration at a community event where a picture was posted of the mayor and I think it was the entire council together. No city business was discussed, but however, that is one of those places where we need to do a better job of making sure, and Matt has done a fantastic job of making sure we're proactive about saying if there is going to potentially be a quorum of people there, it should be noticed that there might be a.
So when we had our annual, sometimes annual,
Occasional.
occasional council and staff dinner, we posted that as a
Always.
public meeting.
You bet.
Yeah,
You
so-
bet. And similarly, there's like the Rotary auction coming up. That's what was the one 7 years ago, I believe that was. Nothing untoward happened,
retreat.
but
The
they
retreat
made a
is
comment.
another example.
You bet.
The upcoming
Yeah.
retreat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you guys are conservative on when you post things. So
We're
that's
way
good.
more conservative than
Yeah.
Some of our neighbors.
other, yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Okay. So compliance for a non-conventional meeting, just post it in a notice like you guys do, and the public can attend. Next slide.
Can
That
I
can
just
get
say
a little
something on
awkward.
that?
Yes.
So before I got on council, there was like a huge amount of controversy because the council had a retreat out of town. And it was really hard for people to attend, so there was kind of a right to attend, but it was not that easy and it wasn't recorded, as I recall, or something. So I would just say, we're not gonna do that. But I wanted people to be aware of that history.
Yeah, and you can hold it out of town, but like
You can.
It was actually recorded, it was live broadcast.
Oh,
It was, yeah, we did.
Little alarming. That's the first time we've been live broadcast.
I did not know that. Thank you.
Maybe coming in.
Oh,
this
so it's all.
position.
I don't know.
There you go. Okay. So the right to attend doesn't mean they get to talk. If it's a regular meeting, you do have to have public comment period. Right to attend, not the right to disrupt, and you guys have been working on that. You can't condition attendance on signing in, asking, do you live in Lake Forest Park, none of that. But someone recording a meeting is allowed unless they're being disruptive. We have had that happen at meetings. It can be a problem if someone is kind of, I would say, doing it too discreetly. They may catch private conversations. That's happened in the past, but it can be recorded. Something to, okay. 2 types of meetings, regular and special. You just had a special, no, you're going to have a special meeting in March. That's right. Yeah. It's not in your regular resolution of these are the meetings we will have in 2024, so it's special. Okay. So special meetings can be called by the presiding officer or by a majority of the members. There's kind of this standing debate on how do a majority of the members call a special meeting if there's not in an open public meeting. But you just sometimes you do that. Matt really is the one who gets the laboring war when it's a special meeting. He has to give the notice at least 24 hours ahead of time to each member of the council, each local newspaper, radio, TV, which has requested special notice. Matt, has anybody requested special notice? No, yay, doesn't have to do that. Has to be posted on the
Simple
city.
is better.
Yeah, there you go, on the city's website. You can only take final action on the agenda items that are listed. You can add items, but you can't take final action on them. Some city councils don't even like to add items because people might not know they're happening, so. Yes,
Go ahead, please.
Clarification on presiding officer. Is that council officer or is that like an officer within?
the
city?
council
The
officer.
council officer does call it.
So it's
okay.
the mayor, in this case, in a strong mayor form, it's the mayor.
Okay,
Yeah, the
so
mayor.
not council officer
Yes,
per se.
presiding officer
That would
of
be-
those meetings.
However,
Council meetings.
My understanding of the RCW is that the deputy mayor at the request of members of the council can also. So,
Right.
So,
That's my understanding too.
I'll
Anyway,
look
Tom
that
and
up
I
for
will
sure.
always consult.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure the presiding officer of council could always get a majority of
Right.
council.
right, oh,
to
maybe
call
that's
the
what it
meeting.
is.
Right, I
That-
think
that-
that's
that's
what it is.
That's how
Yeah.
that person's gonna have it.
One quick note on special meetings, because unfortunately Kim and I have been involved in 3, I think, Kim, in the last 10 years, I can't remember. But we generally do not take action unless it's something really serious. There is no reason for us to take final action on something unless it's an emergency.
I don't remember when I read it.
Yes, one for sure that was emergency.
Yeah.
Councilor Furconi.
Yeah, thank you. So just to be clear then, we're having a special meeting on the 7th of March, and that's going to have agenda items that are very similar to what we'd have during a normal council meeting.
Yep.
We can still take final action on those.
Yes.
You bet.
We can still basically, we're not gonna do this, but hopefully we don't have to do this, suspend the 3-touch rule to take final actions on things that are for discussion or consideration.
Yes,
Okay, great.
anything on the agenda, you can take final action on.
Okay,
3-touch or none. Nothing.
thanks for the clarification.
Okay, next slide. Agendas have to be posted online. You can later modify it, you guys know that. If the agenda is not posted, it doesn't invalidate what you did at the meeting. That's very specific in that RCW. It's like, do it. But if you don't, nothing. Okay. Next slide. Okay. If you're gonna continue a meeting, I don't know that council at a regular meeting has ever had to continue one, but you can continue it to a specific date and time. If you don't have a quorum, the people who are there can continue a meeting to a later date. not, you don't have to have the forum to do that. It has to be posted, that's why Matt puts those signs right out there. And notice for a special meeting has to be provided. Okay, next slide. Executive session, so you can hold executive sessions during regular or special meetings. Has to be one of the purposes that are listed in the OPMA. Common ones are personnel issues, to review complaints about someone on staff. Litigation, that is probably the one we may use the most, I think, because that comes up often, unfortunately. Real estate negotiations or publicly bid contracts, when it's gonna cause a price fluctuation probably. The real estate negotiations, when the city is potentially buying, we have much broader latitude during the executive session, but if the city is the seller or looking at leasing, our parameters for executive session are really narrowed because of the case that came out. And so if we do have that happen, I will try and give you those rules beforehand, because we'll really want to make sure that we're staying within those bounds. I think it was a
Just
court case that got.
Quick interjection. Hey, Brian, you're on camera, brother. Okay, just to let you know, you're being recorded.
It's an open public meeting.
It's all good.
Okay, so you noticed the last time we had an executive session, the mayor has to say what the purpose is. And that's gonna be what's listed in the OPMA, and say what time we will be done or how long this is going to take. We're gonna be here about 20 minutes. You can't extend it during the session though, which we have done many times. The decision takes place behind those closed doors in the executive session, but if you're gonna take action, then you go back out into the open meeting and say, I make a motion, we're adopting this purchase and sale agreement, or we're gonna, you know, whatever it might be, we're agreeing to the settlement agreement in litigation. So you come back out in open session and do that, and we usually try and say before the executive session, whether or not we anticipate action coming out of it, just to give people, if there's someone sitting there, do they want to sit there the entire time you are in an executive session, just to have you come back and say adjourned? So that's just sort of no secret ballots in executive session. We don't vote in executive session.
Just a couple of thoughts, since I'm long in the tooth and I've been through a lot of these. A couple of things, as Kim's described, we have to, it's a very discrete set of parameters. Sometimes we're not able to have an executive session on the topic because it doesn't fit within the RCWs. As Kim has indicated before, what happens behind those closed doors has to stay there. In my now 13 years with the city, and prior to that on boards and commissions, that there has been only one time that there's been an issue, and that was well-intentioned, but it was illegal, and we don't want to ever cross the line. The other thing is that it's really important for us to consider that when we have these executive sessions, they have to be constrained. It's Kim reined me in before multiple times on things, and so we have to stay within the parameters, what the RCW says. If it's a real estate discussion, it's a personnel discussion, it has to stay within those parameters. It can't go beyond that. We also cannot take a vote, even if it's sort of a general, you know, do you understand kind of ending of the meeting? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good summary, yeah.
Just another reminder, if there's any paperwork or anything, it stays there. You don't get to take anything out. Even if you don't intend to share it, it can't
Leave it.
So
Words, you have to eat
action,
it if you take
or
it
not
out of the
actions,
room.
words. Paper, yeah.
The other thing is we limit who is in the executive session to personnel who need to be there. If this is about a police issue, say their contract, we will have police chief in the executive session. If this is about a parks issue, Chief Harden will not be in session, be limited to those who need to be there.
And on point too, we have multiple bargaining agreements coming up this year. It's gonna be critical that all of us are really careful about making sure what happens there stays there. Because of the consideration of the people involved, personnel involved, as well as we don't want to be negotiating against ourselves when it comes to these kind of contract negotiations.
Any other questions on executive sessions? There aren't closed, not closed. There are executive sessions and there are closed sessions, which we have, which don't fall under the Public Meetings Act. We don't have to have it in its bargaining. They don't fall under either one. We just have it. And no one else can.
We notice them in our
Yeah.
agendas. People have to know it's happening, but they
Yes.
don't get to see behind the curtain.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Close.
So there are penalties for violating the Open Public Meetings Act. Court can impose $500 against each person who knowingly violated. They can award attorney's fees to a successful party. Action at the meeting can be declared null and void. And last one, loss of public trust. That's probably the worst one. Yeah. Okay, next slide. So, best practice is to avoid even appearing to have violated the Open Public Meetings Act, socializing, group travel, notice it. We had some litigation and we went on a tour of a trail. And we rode in like 3 different vans so that there wouldn't be council members enough of a quorum in a van. So, probably cost us more gas, but it was better. It was easier on council members too. Okay, next slide. Public Records Act. So. Yes,
Can I ask one last question
Of
for
course.
Janae? Discussions that occur prior to joining the council about council business as it transitions into council, is there case law on, what does that do? So if for instance, you talk to 2 people that are council members, but you've already in the past talked to people who weren't council members, but then they joined council, is that
they weren't on council.
okay? That doesn't constitute, I guess,
It's
a
not a
decision or
quorum.
anything like that? Okay,
No.
cool.
Okay, this one is, first I will say you have a wonderful Public Records Act, Caroline Thompson. She is the city's records management specialist, and she is very good, and you are very lucky to have her. I really like working with her. She's very good. So with that said, you're in good hands. The purpose is so people can freely examine public records. And I will also tell you that Anne Marie Soto in our office is, one of the experts in Open Public Meetings Act. She's on the governor's board. And so when we have very tricky questions, we ask her. She's top notch at this. So again, I think you have some good backup on this. Go ahead and next slide. So first, we have to ask ourselves, is this a public record? It's gotta be in writing. It can't just be a question. So we are always asking ourselves, do we have a writing that has this information on it that we prepared and kept for city business? It can be in any form, email, printed out, whatever, but it has to be a document. So emails, paper files, recordings, web content, but it's got to have some physical form like that. Maybe email is a physical form, but it's an email. It includes your personal electronic devices and non-city email accounts. I would say if you can avoid it, do not use your non-city email account because then we will have to search them. personal information is not subject to a public records request, but it's better just to avoid it, just avoid it. Okay, next slide.
Occasionally, you might have friends who try to engage you in public city business on your. What we've been advised before is like forward that to your city email and respond to them from the city email. And that kind of gets you out of the loop.
Good.
So drive everything back to your city email and do all the further discussion from there. And that keeps you safe.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent point. I had to do that twice today. And part of it is, people don't recognize that it just, put in SEMRA and it just
Yes.
populates whatever's last, so, you know. And it's totally not to assume any burden, but
Exactly.
So the request should be specific and request identifiable records. That is not always the case, and a lot of times Carolyn, she has to go back and ask the people to be more specific to clarify what their request is. And she, let's see. It has to be for a record and not for information. That's a little tricky because people can get very upset when you say to them, you're not asking me for a record, you're asking for information. Like requesting information would be how many public works employees are right-handed. We don't have a document that says that, but we do have, if we did, we would give it to them, but we don't, and people get upset. No, you have that information, so just, go ahead, next slide. City has 5 business days to respond to a public record. They get a nice letter that says, we've received your response, or we received your request, and it tells them when we think we will get a response back. Or if we need clarification, can tell them they've asked for, we know what are a lot of documents. We'll tell them we're gonna give this to you in installments. We expect to give you the first installment in a month or whatever it might be. And I find that information is thought out before it's given to this person. We don't always just say, oh, it's gonna be 3 months. We really look, she looks at what did my initial search come back as and tries to estimate how long it will take.
We don't automatically redact when we have docs, so that redaction process is part of what she has to do. And so that's kind of where she, so depending on how delicate the information is, the longer it might take her to be able to produce documents that can be properly shared with the public.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, next slide. We do read their request very carefully, trying to understand really what they are asking us for. And asking for clarification when we need to, because we have to plug in search terms to, you can imagine searching all the records in the city. So we plug in search terms and we try and do that the best we can. Because if we conduct an inadequate search, there could be monetary consequences for the city. And so the city bears the burden of proof to show the adequacy of the search. We haven't had, a problem with that lately, but we have gone back to individuals and said, here are the search terms we've used. What search terms would you suggest we use? So, because we don't want to miss documents. We'd rather produce a cringeworthy document than not produce it. That is, yeah. Okay, next slide. So if it's non-exempt, we make them available for inspection or copying. Usually people these days just want them emailed. We do publish a fee schedule. But we do not charge for searching or viewing the records or for redacting them, which the fees would be high. Some of these requests. Next slide. So the PRA has exemptions in it, and it says, you do not have to produce One of the most commonly used, I think, in ours is you do not have to produce attorney-client privilege information. And it is redacted. You also do not have to produce, say, social security numbers, bank account numbers. There's a lot of exemptions for juvenile offenders, domestic violence, victims, things like that. There's a lot of exceptions. And with each, when someone gets back their information, they get this log and it gives them every exemption we use. I think it's 12 pages long with a number, 5C, and on the document, it's redacted and it says 5C, and they can look and see, oh, they redacted that because it's personal information of a child enrolled in a Parks and Recreation program. Don't have to give them that. That kid's name was taken out. And so they get this and they can see what every exemption, what every redaction is. And a big one that you would think is used a lot maybe is for privacy. You can redact things if it's privacy is a factor in the exemption, if it would be highly offensive and it's not of legitimate public concern. We do not use that very often at all because it says and is not of legitimate public concern. And usually if it's a document the city has in its possession, it's probably of legitimate public concern, unless it's something, I'd say very, very unusual and very private, but we really do not use that very much at all. Maybe a medical condition, something like that, but it is rarely used. Go ahead, next slide. Here's that we're talking about the exemptions. We can't just black it out. But that's what we used to do is we would take magic markers and actually black it out. People would get sort of that high from the marker, but we don't just black it out. We mark it, we tell them why, and they have that exemption. And our exemptions, it's very detailed what we tell them the exemption is, and just RCW 42-560. Tell them what that is. So hopefully it's helpful. And we have to give them the date of the record, the type of the record, the author and the recipient, and the number of pages. So it's a lot of information. Okay, next slide. There are enforcement penalties. Court can impose civil penalties of up to $100 per day. And the plaintiff does not have to prove they were damaged because they didn't get the records. The court can consider mitigating factors, was the city's search reasonable, that kind of thing. But they can also award their attorney's fees and costs. It can be very expensive. And so we're trying to be very careful on those because that can be very expensive because it's, okay, you didn't produce this document in January. You've been fighting with them about it until December, and now you have this penalty of $50 a day. It can add up quickly. There are special provisions for inmates. Can get an injunction against an inmate getting or making requests if it's to harass, will compromise security, things like that. I don't think we've ever had that since I've been looking at.
One quick thought about enforcement penalties, and I can let Kim speak about the egregious Public Records Act requests. One of the things is policymakers and elected officials that we need to let our community know. We want to be able to be effusive in providing the documents as quickly as we can. At the same time, we have limited resources, and we've had in the last year we've had public records requests that take 30 days, full staff members' time and beyond. And those are, while they're well-intentioned, costs all of us money as neighbors. But I let Ms. Pratt speak to the ones where they go beyond that. And we've been advocating for years at the state level for public records request reform, because there are people from outside of our country that going, making egregious requests that are, and it does happen occasionally. It can be onerous, very expensive for us.
Yeah, and a lot of cities at one time will get a request, and we will see, the the Association of Washington City Attorneys, we will see emails from each other. Did you get this request? Did you get this request? And then we'll know, okay, everybody's getting this request. And, you know, we just try and do the best we can. We share ideas about maybe a particular request or a particular requester. There was a few years ago, it was a young man, and I think his intentions started off being good. He wanted, the amount of documents he was asking for would have just taken months and months to provide, to go through, even if you did it every day. And one of our attorneys, Rachel Turpin and Anne Marie Soto, they invited him in and they sat down and they talked to him and said, okay, what are you really looking for? And he withdrew his request and he got what he asked for. He really didn't want that, you know, room full of documents, but he didn't know how to do it. I think they treated him respectfully
There you go.
and he got what he wanted and it saved a lot of time from the clerk. So we try that. There are some people who are just trying to waste your time. And we get those requests and I feel sorry for them.
They're very expensive.
There is something, if they don't pick it up, we can stop working on their request. But the fees in Lake Forest Park are not prohibitive. It's just a matter of them having to pay it. And sometimes they don't, if it's just a request because they want to waste some time.
Thank you.
Strategies. You know, culture of compliance, starting with senior leadership, good example. I think you guys already do that. You make everyone very aware of what they need to do. I think staff does know the law. We try and, you know, get into every corner of the records, and I think the more time your record specialist here, she'll know even more where she can find documents. Protecting the records. We do, I know you have a system set up for records not to be purged when they are subject to a request. That's good. Important records are sent to the state archives. And records, once they meet their retention schedule, they are destroyed. Then they won't be searched. Okay, next slide. Those are the RCWs. In case you're having insomnia one night and just need a little reading. Scintillating information.
Yes.
Next slide. So I think this is any questions? Okay. Great. You can-
We're all up to speed.
Right? You can
Yeah.
check that off of your my to-do list. I am up to date on my OPMA and PRA.
Well, colleagues, you know, it goes without saying, we're all a team here, so whatever you need, ask questions, please, early and often. Ellen, you haven't had a chance to chime in. Do you have any questions or comments? I want to make sure we didn't miss you.
Can you hear me?
You bet.
Okay, I just, for the record, I wanted to mention that Brian was helping me earlier to get my headphones going, so that was just too coincidental that the topic we were discussing, and here Brian's face is on the screen at our executive meeting, so I apologize.
No. This is not an executive session.
No, you're fine.
Welcome.
Yeah,
Join our meeting.
absolutely.
This is a public meeting.
And we will retain his face on video for the next 10 years until it can be destroyed. Yeah,
Thank-
right, not his face, yes,
Yeah.
sorry, I apologize.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
It does bring up the question of virtual participation in executive sessions. This has come up before where people have been unable to attend in present, it is, if you are going to be attending virtually to an executive or closed session, no one else may be in the room. My,
Right.
Ms. Pratt, you
Yeah,
speak way more knowledgeably about that. No one else can have knowledge of what happened in that session.
On the other side of it,
Yeah,
on your side of it,
we did have
including
some,
your cat, and just saying, you know.
it's gonna be real hard.
Yes.
we did have someone attend in an airport. And, but he was on headphones,
Yep.
so no one was hearing what we were saying. So it was fine, and we asked, are you on your head?
I think I had to do that once too.
So that's okay, just no one else can hear.
Colleagues, questions? Mr. Lebo, you've been very quiet.
So sometimes you hear people refer to a freedom of information request of FOIA. Yeah, how is that different than a public request?
Those are for federal documents. They take much longer to get back than ours. But that's what it is.
The rules are pretty similar.
I-
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, of course, yes.
some agencies are terrible. Some are good, probably true in the state of Washington as well.
Yes,
Gosh, that's gonna take us 2 years, but also I've heard of the strategy being used of asking the person who makes a voluminous request to come in. And giving them a chance to, you know, better articulate what they want,
Yeah.
and it saves everybody time and
That's
energy,
great.
so I've heard that used, yeah.
yeah. There are a few frequent flyers that we know, they're just doing it to make a pattern work.
Yeah.
We do not. When,
Paula, did you have questions, comments?
No, I've done this.
Councilmember
So I-
Tom, you got a question?
I just wanted to thank the city administrator for putting that into the reports where they where it's listed how many public records requests there are, and it's separated into the police versus not police, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really important to understand.
Yeah, having that in there now, which what hasn't been always,
Yeah.
and having the permit information also, I think it's all very, makes it more useful to see the volume of what staff are doing.
and we keep our bill on public records separate, it's a separate bill from general attorney services, so Bill can always see. And that bill has gone down by volumes since you got your new special. Cost savings. It is.
Appreciate that. Sorry, Kim.
No.
We
I would
appreciate
say
that.
that is
the
not
efficiencies.
anyone's favorite work to do,
Yeah,
and
And some people do that 100%. I don't know how they do that.
Yeah.
I like just getting the interesting questions.
yeah. Colleagues, any other questions on topic? If not, we can adjourn and move upstairs. Give you a chance to grab a glass of water or something, take a bathroom break. Anyone? Okay, with that, thank you, everybody. We're adjourned. Ellen, we'll see you ostensibly upstairs, virtually upstairs.